Here we are. This is essentially the third discussion of this five-part series of the five elements of an intimate relationship. It's been a while since we had the second one or the last one. You have to forgive me. I was doing a bit of traveling. Um, but now here we are with the third session. So the first two was financial and sexual. So those were the two elements that we had gone through already. Now we're going through the emotional element of an intimate relationship. So welcome, thank you, the short crowd that decided to come. Thank you so much. This is a live discussion presented by the Life Network. Thank you for being here. And as I mentioned, today we are going to be talking about the emotional element of an intimate relationship. So don't mind. Let's get started. So, the purpose of this discussion is to bring further unity and understanding amongst men and women regarding the emotional element of an intimate relationship. This discussion is determined to bring an understanding of how emotions play in a relationship or marriage. The Life Network is the Life Network's goal is to educate and inform participants about the emotional component of an intimate relationship. So very simple. We're going to be talking about emotions and its impact on relationships. The guidelines, it's a small crowd, so I think we'll be just fine on that. But if you can, well, most of you introduced yourself already. Please respect participants' privacy. Do not attack anyone personally. Do not interrupt anyone when they're speaking. Share the time and excuse my interruption. So if you maybe are talking a little bit too long, going past 2, 3 minutes, let's see, I think there's someone coming in. Let's see, 1 second. Hey, Samuel, Samuel. Oh, he's not in. Maybe didn't come all the way through. Maybe he'll try again. So, getting back at it. So the emotions. Um, Obviously, this is a huge element. I think that this is probably one of the more important elements of a relationship because, in my opinion, I think this is where the breakage may happen. After you learn about the money that your partner may or may not be making. Obviously, the sexual experience may be fun, maybe not. Those things are usually things that occur um, faster in a relationship. And so emotions take a little bit more time as you get to learn about one another and figure out who that person is. And as you know, I'm sure you guys have your own experiences. Once you go through this component, you may or may not realize that this is the person for you. So this is the third component, and we're going to get right into it. So, what is emotions? Or what are emotions? Emotions are a strong feeling or a state of mental agitation. Why are emotions important? Because they help understand ourselves, they strengthen relationship with your partner, induce communication, and motivates action. Now, this thing about chakras, I'm going to skip this component for now, or at least this aspect, but the two chakras that I believe are attached with this are the heart chakra and the throat chakra. And that's pretty almost self-explainable as you can imagine. Emotions, right? It deals with your heart. and of course, communication, the throat chakra. And here's some facts you guys might be interested in. Let me move my thing. I can't see because it's blocking. I want to be able to read this clearly to y'all. Some interesting facts. So we have some interesting facts. All right, so check this out. So women are nearly twice as likely to initiate breakups compared to men. 40% of long distance relationships in the US fail. So almost half of long distance relationships fail. Approximately 70% of straight unmarried couples break up within the first year. So 70% of straight unmarried couples break up in the first year. That's more than 2 out of 3 relationships. 92% of open marriages end up failing. 2 out of 3 couples break up within 6 months of becoming parents for the first time. I'll say that again. 2 out of 3 couples break up within 6 months of becoming parents for the first time. So when couples get together and they have a child, 2 out of 3 of those couples end up breaking up in the first 6 months. 85% of American relationships don't survive after a partner admits to cheating. That probably makes sense. So, top reasons for relationship fails: communication breakdown, loss of trust, unresolved conflict, increasing detachment. Men's desires in a relationship: trust our judgment, trust our ability, give us admiration, do not disrespect us in public. Women's desire in a relationship: give us continuous attention, continue to show us interest, touching, right, such as hugging or cuddling, help around the house and with the children, and tell us we are beautiful. Now, this is something that I've shown in the past. Really, what these stats are is it's more along the lines of the Black population, and it's really just to give some significance of compared to other ethnic groups. And you'll see it on the next slide, but we're not doing too well in regards to marriage percentages compared to other groups. That's really what the basis of this is. This is recorded, so if you want to go back and look, you can definitely take a look. And then here we are in the marriage by race. This is the different ethnic groups, right, that you see. And as you can see, Black folks are not doing as well as other ethnic groups. So we talked about that in the past, and we might be able to bring that up a little bit today, but that's the basis. So a couple of solutions I thought of, and we'll see what solutions you all have. Um, so in regards to the emotional component, right? Number one, emotions help understand ourselves. Number two, improve decision making. Three, motivates action. And four, ultimate communication. So when it comes to this component, you're dealing with your partner and all the different things that come along with it, right? The issues, the conversations, the disagreements. Um, it's very important to understand that you have to communicate and you have to communicate effectively. And so these ideas are just something that I would like everyone to think about while they navigate through their relationships. Um, it's good to talk, sometimes space as well, but if you really care about that person, you got to come back together, right? And have a discussion. So that's how that works. And so this is pretty much the summary of everything that I've talked about. So, like I said, it is a bit of a smaller crowd, but I do have some questions that I want y'all to be able to get engaged and get involved in. Let's see if we can get through maybe about 4 or 5 questions, and you can give me your opinion. That's what this whole discussion is about. It's about the community sharing their opinions, right? So, um, I'm gonna start like this. the first question is, what role do emotions play in a relationship? Simple as that. What role do emotions play in a relationship? It's the part where you guys can unmute yourselves and George, how you doing? Good to see you.
Hello, how's it going?
Well. You came just in time. I just finished the first dialogue with the presentation. Now we're getting into the communication aspect. And the first question came in just in time was what role do emotions play in a relationship? So anybody is welcome to answer that question or give me your opinion.
I'll start it off.
Yes.
Thanks. That usually is what happens.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's a very, I mean, it's important, of course, everyone knows that. I think the basis of emotions, as everyone knows, women are emotional creatures, men are more, what is the word? Not tactical, but there's another word I'm looking for. Brittany, what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
How you gonna throw me into your answer?
Shut up, just answer it. So we happen to
Connected?
No, not connected. The way that men work is they don't base their decisions off of emotions. We do. We are affected by certain things, so we react with our emotions, whereas they do it. I don't want to say logical because that's not the word, but they.
Pragmatic?
There you go. Thank you. Okay, bye. Um, so then from there, it plays a big part in the relationship because if you aren't mindful of your partner's emotions, depending on the type of relationship you have, it could either make or break it. So if you aren't aware of them or pay attention to them, or if you're too in tune with them, that can also be a bad thing.
Mm, okay. All right. Anybody else? What
I
role?
think I don't know, piggyback is the right word, but um, I think emotions play like a role in like connecting you to another person. Um, they they add like meaning. It's the spark, you know what I mean? It's the, you know, I guess the feeling of what's the word? Feeling alive, feeling, you know, I think that's
Is it the aspect of like emotions, right? Because we talked about the other two components, which was finances and sex. And so now when you navigate, those things are very trivial. I mean, I don't want to say trivial, but more trivial than the other components, I'm saying. So when you
mm,
talk about the emotions, are you saying like now you're getting to the aspect of like now there's a lot of care there. Now there's
yeah,
a lot of like
yeah,
bond.
for sure.
You're like elevating
Bonding.
with the next person.
Yeah. Yeah. Bonding connection, I think, is like probably the foundation of it, right? Like really learning and understanding that person, understanding intent, you know, the things we can't um where you start to infer, where you start to fill in the blanks, where you start to really understand, where you really start to like see the what's the word? Um you start to understand the meaning
Mm,
of why someone does, says, feels, you
yeah.
know, all the things that they say, do, and feel. Um, yeah, I would say that was a very fragmented answer, but like, yeah, like very much like the bonding connected part, right? The part where you feel like you say shit like, you know, oh, sorry, everyone, I curse. Where you say stuff like, you know, this is my person and it's the chemistry and it's the, you know, all that goodness. Yeah.
It's like going over that first hurdle where again, the money and stuff like that. It's cool to go on these fancy dates and ride a nice car. Like that's cool.
But
Um,
so, not to cut you off, but to
yeah.
cut you off,
Um,
though, your emotions play into that, though. You got to think about it because if you're more into someone or your emotion for someone is more loving in the beginning than it is later on, you're going to change the way you spend on a person. You're going to change the way that you treat a person. So I think it is I hate to say it, a bit, it's not bigger than finance, but it's one of those things where depending on the relationship, it could be bigger than some of the other things.
Oh
yeah.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to, what I'm trying to say is like when you see someone with a fancy car, right? That's, I don't necessarily think, I can't say emotions don't play a part in that, but it's not so emotional. It's more like, ooh, that looks nice. It's not something you necessarily gravitate towards or attach to. And the same with sex, and more so along the lines of the males, where we, I'll speak, maybe I'll speak for myself. We don't necessarily need a bond in order to engage in sex, right? So that's why I put this emotional component separate because now this is the aspect of like, wait, hold on, do you actually care about this person? Or is this person just come with certain things that you like, right? This is where this component where now we start to get out of the tangible, start to get out of the material. Now we start to get into the feelings of it, the intangible things we can't touch, but we feel internally. So I think that's where I'm trying to navigate with it. But did anybody else want to chime in on what role emotions play in a relationship?
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm George. Sorry, it took me a while to get into the Eventbrite. It took me a while to know there was a Zoom link. So I'm usually not that technologically inept, but for some reason today I am. Anyway, neither here nor there. I think it's an interesting question, right? I mean, I think when you put that question with anything, right? Like, what role do emotions play with fill in the blank? If you're talking about humans, my immediate thought goes to, well, like not everything, but anything. Like human beings are emotional. Um, and again, I'm contradicting what someone else said earlier. Like I do believe that every human being makes decisions on an emotional basis. Now, how much emotion and what type of emotion varies from person to person, from situation to situation. So for me, I think like they're gonna play a role and a pretty significant one because we as humans have demonstrated time and time again that many of our decisions are highly emotionally based, regardless of how much logic is out there, right? So for me, someone tells me, hey, like if you eat this diet and you stay away from these foods and just eat them in moderation, and you need a little bit of light exercise. That all makes logical sense to me, right? I don't disagree with it at all logically. Am I going to do it? Right? Am I actually successful at, making sure I get a little bit of exercise most days? No, I need some sort of motivation, and that motivation is usually based on some form of emotion, right? How I'm feeling mentally, how I'm feeling in general. Emotions can play a part, right? If you're upset, you might want to go work out because you want to get some of that frustration out. If you're upset, it may make you not want to work out. You might just want to be like, I'm just going to watch TV, right? So I think that just like any decisions that we make, they're going to play a role in our relationships. And I think what's important is being aware what kinds of emotions drive you to make certain types of decisions within that relationship. And, it's hard to pinpoint any specific thing because I think it changes all the time. Um, so yeah, I'm someone that doesn't really separate emotion from logic in terms of human beings and choices we make because I think it's all wrapped into one. I think that's kind of what makes us messy but beautiful. Is that we are emotional creatures. And someone mentioned how like men tend not to be emotional. It's like I think we are emotional. It's just maybe different in how we maybe internalize the emotion, convey the emotion, and different things will make us feel angry, upset, sad, happy versus, like if I watch a show, someone could cry because they find it sad. I might not find it sad, right? That doesn't mean I don't have an emotion towards it. I just don't happen to find it that sad, right? Or scary movies, people feel like they feel frightened all the time. I actually find them funny, right? Like I find they're cheesy and they're funny, and I'm not really frightened by them. But that doesn't mean that I'm not frightened by other things in life. I'm just not frightened by horror movies or scary movies. Um, so yeah, I think that emotions are a pivotal concept in relationships, and if you change relationships, it's going to change the types of emotions you're going to have.
I agree.
Anyways, I feel like I'm rambling.
No, it's okay. That's why we're here. No worries. Um, did anyone have a response to that, or did they have their own opinion before going to the next question?
Yeah, I can piggyback off of George. I agree with him too as well as far as like the emotional side of for especially for men, right? I think, the narrative is, we don't drive off emotions, but we do. I think everybody's driven off emotions from the moment we're born, right? And I think emotions, especially in a relationship, um, it kind of guides us or it kind of puts us in a space where it creates trust and even safety in the relationship because of our emotions, right? Because of our experiences of what we've been through in the past. And so I think, tapping into emotions, especially as men, especially as Black men, the first thing, my generation, our generation is don't cry, suck it up, that type of mentality. So we have this tough, you know, masculine, personality, whereas that emotion, sometimes we got guys that are very like teddy bear that wants to be hugged and all of that. So I think it takes a big role because it guides the relationship. If you have emotions, and even if you don't tap into your emotions, we all have emotions, just how we tapping into it. And like George said, is like you can watch a scary movie to a sad movie, and we all tap into it differently. We all have different types of triggers, right? And so I think is really with our emotions is how we manage it in a relationship and how we can connect with each other, and that creates that bond in a relationship. Emotions drive it, right? And I know even just I wasn't there for the finances or sex, but for me, I know finances is probably the number one reason for divorces, right? Because they don't talk about it. And then, sex too. It's just like, what do you do after sex? Do you guys actually talk? Do people actually talk? Right? And a lot of times relationships is just like, all right, well, let's make up. We had an argument, let's just make up sex.
Mhm.
And so there's no emotion behind it. And I think that emotion can create even relationships to kind of not succeed or not move on and not grow. And so I think emotion is tapping into on both sides, and you don't want to dismiss the partner's emotions too as well. So that's the bigger thing, because that creates insecurity, trust issues, all of that. So you have to tap into both sides. I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. And I think
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. You wanted to respond?
Yeah, not well, yeah, respond-ish. I don't know. But it was interesting, like the point that Daniel just made about like how the I feel like the connected part of a relationship, right? Like, you have an argument and then you have makeup sex, but you don't actually talk. And I think it's kind of interesting too because you really have to know yourself, like self-reflection and doing all this. You have to understand like where these things are coming from. I know there's like buzzwords out there with like trauma bonding and childhood trauma and like navigating all these different things. So I think like, you know, it's almost like finding someone that is like the yin to your yang who doesn't maybe read between the lines or read into anything. It's like how solid are you coming into a relationship as well? You're smiling. Is this like another one of your questions?
You are a psychic.
Okay, then I'll stop. I'll wait for the question.
You're a psychic. Because that's exactly what I want to talk about. I had a friend the other day, I'm talking to a lady right now, and one of my guy friends was like, "Oh, you're trauma bonding with her." And I'm like, "Trauma bonding?" Like, no, I'm just understanding where she's coming from in her life and her background. But my question to you all, Brittany, maybe you can jumpstart us, is what role does trauma play in the relationship?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny too, right? Like, what year is this? 2025. Okay, so like 20 years ago, where I was not heavily dating, I don't think. But like we didn't have words, we didn't have identifiers. We couldn't say, I mean, unless you were like deep in therapy or whatever, or whatever. But like now these words like are running rampant as far as a way to identify what you're doing and also to an extent absolve you from accountability and responsibility for doing some wild shit. But at the same time, I think like trauma, depending on how you understand your trauma and how you understand it to show up in your life, in your relationships, your dynamics, interactions, all emotions, all the things, I think it's always kind of an undercurrent to what to your daily life, right? Like how you're tapped in. Not even getting deep into what is trauma? How are we identifying that? Right? Is that a bad breakup? Is that something that happened when you were younger? Is that, getting fired from your job? It's all those things, obviously, but like, what are you bringing into it? So I think trauma, going back to us, the safety aspect of it, right? Like, one, how does it show up? And how does your partner soothe it, male or female, right? First off, let me just start here. Like, and CJ, you kind of know me a little bit, but like, I don't subscribe to like male female dynamics all the time because like people are people at the end of the day. Like, they all suck.
Mhm.
So, like, and then they're all great, So I think it's just where you are, like how you show up. And when you meet someone that either brings that out in a really great, beautiful way, or someone who brings that out in like the worst, tragic, terrible ways. So yeah, I'll stop it there. But I think trauma is it's I think it's how you recognize your trauma, how you meet your trauma, how you talk about your trauma and stuff.
I like it. Anybody else? What role does trauma play in a relationship?
I can go real quick. Trauma is an interesting one for me. And I like what is it, Brittany?
Yes.
What she was saying, right? Because there's so many different types of trauma. And trauma is inevitable, and most human beings will experience some form of trauma in their lives. Just how severe it is the difference, and then how you react to the trauma, right? And this kind of all plays back into the emotions and stuff like that. Um, I think a lot of times we grow up like with loved ones. Not everybody, right? Unfortunately, some people have circumstances they can't, but a lot of people do have people around them that can support them as they're growing up, as they're going through tough times, as they're going through trauma or growing pains. And I think what happens is when we sometimes get into an intimate relationship, we sort of have that automatic expectation that that person is going to take care of us in that same way. And we have symptoms of our trauma, and if we're not talking about those things, right? Then it can really come as a shock to the partner, and vice versa. And ultimately, right, the relationship pays the price if they're not being dealt with in healthy ways. And I think these days too, right, where we have some accessibility to things, therapy, things of that nature. You guys have all probably heard like your partner shouldn't be your therapist, those types of things. And I agree, right? I don't think they should be your therapist, but they can definitely be the person that probably listens, understands, is more patient than anyone else in your life. But at the same time, they may not have the coping mechanisms or the skill sets to kind of help you go through that, or really just the contextual notion of being able to do it with their partner because they have to live with them, right? So you might even have a therapist who has a partner or they're married, right? And they go home, do they then play therapist to their partner, right? Because technically they have all those tools and the skill sets and all those types of things, and they'll probably be the first ones to tell you, no, that's not a good idea. So yeah, I think trauma is going to play a significant role, and I think this is why it's important to, if you're looking at long-term relationships and committed long-term relationships, and especially if you're going to be living with someone else, or making a family with them, these are definitely things that you want to talk about before you do those things, if you can, right? In an ideal world, we all know that life doesn't always happen that way, right? Sometimes things just happen, and we get caught up in so many things. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that, your trauma eventually is going to manifest itself in one way or the other if you're not figuring out ways to deal with it. And we all have a healing journey, and we all need to find our own ways to heal from things. We can find support and care from other people, but at the end of the day, there's certain things that we just kind of have to deal with on our own. And that's why, I stand by the narrative of, know thyself and love thyself first.
Yeah.
Um, because if you can't love yourself, there's no way you're gonna have the space to love someone else. Um, and so that's huge, and loving yourself isn't just like this thing that you did one time and now you're good, right? Because you can fall in and out of love with yourself as well. So that means that you could love yourself first, meet your partner, and you commit yourself to them, and you love them, and then things happen, right? Like trauma happens after that, right? And you fall out of love with yourself, and so you're gonna have to refine yourself then, right? And so does that mean that you then have to like separate from your partner while you go and rediscover yourself? No, right? But I think that it is important to make sure that you keep in mind that you do have to eventually come back to that. You do eventually have to come back to being able to love yourself and heal from the things that maybe have traumatized you, and be aware of those things, and then listen to your partner and understand the places they're coming from, because their trauma may be very different than yours. And I think just the way we're talking about emotions and processing them differently, same thing's going to happen and there as well.
Uh, it's a tricky situation you bring up, George, because, on one aspect, right, you're kind of talking, hey, heal thyself, right? Love thyself first before you go in a relationship. And that kind of made me think, well, should someone go in a relationship when they know that they have personal issues to deal with? But people do that every day, every second they go into something, because they need attachment, because they need bonding to each
Hmm.
other. And it's kind of like catch 22, where how does that work? Where this person knows they have trauma, they have issues, but one of the aspects of healing that issue or trauma is bonding and being with somebody, and just having someone there for you. So I don't want to change the question. I'm still interested in hearing others. Um, but yeah, it's very interesting dynamic how that might work. But are there other opinions about the role trauma plays in a relationship?
I can speak up. I kind of like that perspective you threw out there too. And even like kind of what George was saying, as far as like you said, love yourself and heal yourself first, or at least know yourself first, right? But it is interesting because, like you said, it's like you can go in a relationship with that. I just I would just say trauma bonding or trauma dumping, however you want to call it. Like I've heard it called, all kinds of ways. Um, it's healthy if you trust the person you're telling. I say that because it's like if you're telling your significant other or someone that you're just getting to know, and then if you get in disagreements, I call them disagreements or arguments, and then they use that against you, right? Because of your trauma with whatever it may be, and then they use that against you. Sometimes that just makes it more of an emotional damage for you, right? Because now they're using it against you, and you trusted this person enough to express and throw all the trauma out there. You were vulnerable, you were transparent, and then they use it against you. So I would just suggest if you are gonna share stories or share trauma, it's you got to kind of tread that a little bit lightly, right? And you got to be careful on who you express it to because you don't want them to spread the word or gossip as well. So you got to have to protect and create some boundaries for yourself. But yeah, I think you're right though too as well. I don't think you have to be like completely perfect, and healed and know yourself and love yourself. But it is important to do that. It is important to find yourself, and I agree with George. You gotta love yourself,
Mhm.
because you're just gonna create the issues or the whatever the relationship you're going through is just gonna be a lot of stress in that relationship if you don't find yourself first. So trust somebody. I would say that trust somebody you're talking to, especially when you're sharing those vulnerable moments, because those are vulnerable moments, man. And especially when people use that, especially in relationships. I hear all the time my buddy is like, man, I shared this with my girl and now she's using it against me. It's like, dang, what do I do?
Mhm.
So it's definitely something you got to trust somebody with that.
I love it.
Can I jump in really quick?
Absolutely.
Um, Yeah, I agree with so much of what Danielle and George said in regard to like knowing yourself. And I think it's also like knowing yourself and knowing how you show up and understanding your triggers and understand how it impacts your partner. Cause it's just like a ripple effect. I'm going to say something, you're going to react to it. I'm going to react to your reaction and so on and so forth. And I think it's like, this is coming back to like really understanding intent. It's when you I don't think you have to be a fully healed person. I don't think we're that. We're forever evolving and learning ourselves and
Yeah.
finding ourselves. I think it's understanding, the things that continuously show up that are unhealed that become, the thing. Cause like who's really working on the good, right? You're almost always kind of trying to improve and refine and do all of that. So I think in a relationship, especially communication, it's like the ability to say, hey, I feel this way. And taking like ownership of I feel this way and I have impacted you, or, just really understanding that someone's gonna have not everyone's gonna have the response you expect. Um, I think even like how they say in breakups, you learn more about a person at the end of a relationship than you do in the beginning, right? And you start seeing how people really act and show up, respond, and do, when things are ending or things aren't good. So, yeah, yeah, healing is important. We don't, most folks, I'm speaking absolutes, I think many folks have no idea what it even means to begin that process. Um, But to know yourself, I think, is probably the most honest, respectful, loving things you can do for yourself is show up and be real. Lie to the world, but not lie to yourself. So, like, and I think that helps too when you're in the middle of a disagreement or an argument where it's like, hey, do you really understand why I'm feeling how I'm feeling? Or are you just like, you know what I mean? You just don't want to feel bad or you want to absolve yourself from the guilt or whatever. Like me, I'm like, I'm gonna tap in, like, look, I get it. I'm big on validation. I see you, I hear you, I feel you, and right, yes, ands, not yes, buts, all the things. So yeah, I do. I think knowing yourself is probably in today's climate and world is probably the best thing you can do to invest in your emotional journey.
Amazing. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? See thumbs up for that. Okay, which is good, but I want to segue into we're kind of staying in the same path a little bit, but this still kind of takes us out. So the next question is how important is learning about someone's past in the relationship? And does their past dictate your decision to continue to be with them? I hope that makes sense. So, how important is learning about someone's past, and does that dictate your decision on whether you continue to be with them or not?
I can start on that, and then I actually have to go. I gotta pick up my kid here soon, but um, so yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting, right? And I think this kind of goes hand in hand with trauma, right? Because there's usually a lot of trauma that comes from our past. I think there's a lot of things that happen too from prior relationships if people have had past relationships. But yeah, I think that for me, I think it varies on each individual. like I'm learning and growing as I go too in my relationship, right? Now that I've been in one for a while, and sometimes I think to myself, man, I wish I would have known that sooner about that person, or I would have wish I would have known that sooner about myself, or and then I thought, well, would I have decided not to date them back then? Like right now, I'm not going to do that, but like, would that have affected my decision in the past, right? And then I just begin to spiral because I'm like, okay, I'm living in the past right now. So, so I think that it shouldn't matter, right? From a logical standpoint, but emotionally, I think sometimes we go there, at least I go there, right? And I think it's important to know about a person's past if it's going to have an effect on their present. So again, it goes into that like kind of trauma. But again, I don't like most of us just aren't always aware. Like sometimes we lack self-awareness of what our trauma even is or what our triggers even are. And I think that goes back to the whole know thyself. And having good high self-esteem allows you to share those things like Daniel was talking about vulnerability. Vulnerability is harder with higher insecurity. And so I think when you work on yourself and your self-esteem, you don't have to be perfect, but you do want to get to a place where you have high self-esteem and in order to be vulnerable and share things. Because we're all human, we all make mistakes or we all have past and we all have things that we couldn't control. Um, but yeah, I'm always gonna look at the person that's in front of me in that moment. And I'm always going to look at them and says, well, are you letting your past dictate right now? And if that's the case, then we need to work on that. We need to see about how we can change that. But I don't think it should change anything. But I mean, viscerally speaking, maybe I haven't been challenged or put into situations where the past was severe enough, right? Like what if I end up meeting someone one day and I find out later in the relationship they were a convicted criminal, right? And then what was the crime, right? So I mean, I've never had to face those situations at this point in my life, and maybe I never will, but so I can't really speak to the different situations that are out there. I can only, you know, based on my lived experiences, I haven't encountered anything where I hear something about someone's past and go, oh my God, like that's a deal breaker, right? It's more of like, where are you at now? And where are we willing to go together? Because, I've been in places where I'm low and I've had low self-esteem. And then I've been in places where I have high self-esteem, and that's life, right? You're going to have those ups and downs. And, having a partner is someone you can share those ups and downs with. And it becomes really special. But I come from the school of thought, right? Understanding just human history and stuff like that. And Carl, you know me in terms of going into that realm. But like for me, monogamy isn't something that's relatively like this old ancient concept. Monogamy is fairly new to human beings, right? Marriage was what, like the 16th century where it was kind of coming into being, but it wasn't really popular for most people to do it until much, much later than that. So for the most part, there's still a lot about monogamy we have to learn. And I'm not advocating to not have monogamy, right? But, in the society that we live in now, it seems to make the most sense. But um at the same time, I'm simply like acknowledging the fact that it's not necessarily the natural thing for human beings to be just in one relationship their entire lives. And so you really have to work at it and you really have to think about what it's going to take. And for some people, they might be in a relationship and say, you know what? I don't need to know everything there is to know about you, and you don't need to know everything is about me. And that works for them, right? They're both okay with that, and then other people are not okay with that, right? And so then you're going to have to work through that and make decisions about whether or not it's important enough for you to keep that relationship and therefore share everything if the other partner needs that.
Great.
So I'll say that. I do have to go here. So I apologize for leaving early. I love these discussions. I love the different perspectives I'm hearing. Thank you, Carl, for putting this together and creating this space. It's really cool, but pleasure semi meeting you guys since we're not really meeting each other in person, but
You'll meet them on the
it
next
is nice to
one.
hear it.
Yeah, you'll meet them on the next one, George. I really appreciate you coming through.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
But okay, anyone want to follow that?
I was like, who's Carl?
Yeah, get out of here. You know
It
that.
took me a
Oh
minute.
yeah, yeah. I know him by car. I don't know him by CJ, but I'm seeing CJ on here
Yeah,
now. So
yeah, yeah.
now I'm gonna give you flack at work. I'm just gonna be like, hey guys, this is CJ.
No worries, man. No worries.
Okay. Um, so for this one, like history, I feel like it's so funny. So speaking for myself and tapping into also what I do for a living, where I'm like making like, data-driven decisions. I love data. So like historical data, whatever your word preference is. I want to know. I want to know, who you were. I want to know how you got to who you are. I want to know, how that affects where you're going. I want to know all those things. And I really want to know them, you know, because of I want to understand, right? Like I want to know you, how you became you, why you're you, what's your why, what's all the, those foundational pieces. Like how do you make decisions? How do you handle conflict, right? Like what was your experience in the past? Why are you um hesitant? Or why do you feel so vulnerable? And, not to like uh because I'm not like a wrecking ball either, right? It really is a place of understanding. And I start there. And I think a big reason why I start there is because I think for all of us in some way, shape, or form have been through things. So you want to meet people from a place of grace. If a relationship is intentional and you really want to be there, right? Let's just talk about people who are really looking for a relationship, right? Like you're gonna stop yourself from doing the things that you used to do before, hopefully, right? To benefit wherever your relationship is going or the dynamic that you're trying to build or, all the things. So, um, yeah, I feel like history is good. And then, to the point, I think it was Daniel who said it, it's like if I tell you something and then you use it against me, like not weaponizing it is important, and then wondering like, why are you doing that? Right. That's an ego thing, right? And that's a pride thing. Like it's oh, I'm better because you're less. Like that
Yeah.
doesn't belong in a relationship and it doesn't belong in dynamics. So you have to ask yourself, but then, people get in relationships all day long and ignore red flags because they're soothing whatever's missing, right? So like, what is that? Is it loneliness? Is it being in a caretaker role, especially for single moms and stuff like that, right? Like you lose your identity when taking care of your kids, your family, all those things. You find a man who goes, it's all about you, but you realize he also kind of sucks, but he's also like all about you. You know what I mean? And that's just what I've heard. I'm not a mom, but yeah. So like I I just want to like I think history is good. I think history is good. I think history is not to be used against anyone. I think when you care to know.
Mhm. Yeah. I like that. I do. Anyone else want to chime in on that before we go to the next question? I see the room getting smaller, so I'm gonna ask two more questions. One kind of on the negative spectrum, and then we're gonna end it on a positive, constructive perspective. But anyone else before I move on? Okay. So here's the next question. How do you know, how or when do you know that the relationship just can't be fixed? Like, what is that feeling? What is that thought process? How do you know when it's just like this, it's just not gonna work?
You mean like, well, are we talking like long-term relationships? What are we saying? Like, are we talking about flings? Like, what are you saying?
Give me your experience. More so, I mean, obviously, you've been together for some months, maybe even years. You don't really want to. go on first date, be like, that didn't work. I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about something you really tried to stick it through and really tried to work it out, something that has gone a year plus maybe, you know, how do you know or when do you know when it just can't be fixed?
That's interesting. So there was a Tiana Taylor did she was on a podcast and she made a comment that I resonate with so hard. And she was like, I love until I can't love anymore. Right. And I think like I definitely embody that a little bit in that, you know, you get to whatever your limit is and you go, okay, that's it. I don't know what that is for obviously, other folks, but I think it's when you as crazy as it is, like you stop caring, like things that bothered you that you wanted to work through or that you wanted to understand, you just don't care anymore. Like you get tired, you know, it becomes a heavy lift. The emotional labor lift of holding up the relationship becomes incredibly heavy. You're doing all the work, you're making all the effort, you're the initiative, you're just like when it starts to fall all on you to upkeep it, to be interesting, to be fun, to lock in, to do all that, then it's like, all right, this is a one man, one woman, one
Mm,
non-binary individual show. You know what I mean? Like, then it's like, all right, I think that's when I know.
yeah.
For me, that's when I know it's over. And then not being able to communicate that. Yeah, I would say that'd be my take on that one.
Anyone else have their perspective?
Yeah, that's an interesting statement saying love until I can't love anymore. There's a lot to unpack there. Just because it's really like for me, I think in your question as far as when you know a relationship can't be fixed, I think it's when you in a relationship you kind of set goals, emotional goals, right? And even just goals in general in a relationship where you want to get to. And it seems like if you set it on day one and then you're on day 3,000 and you're still on day one, I think that's when it can't get fixed, right? Or if there's a little bit of step progress, is like, what is your timeline? Um, and I think really with that statement of love until I can't love anymore, I think it's like it kind of taps into the emotion, right? It's like what capacity am I at emotionally to stay in this relationship if we're taking baby steps, right? Or if we're not even meeting our goals. And so, um, yeah, I do like that statement, but it's actually very interesting because it can be different definitions for everybody, right? Because love is different for everybody, but I do like that statement.
No, I appreciate your statement of, mentioning goals and progress. I want you to stick around a little bit because the next component goes into those things. And that's why it's really important for us to talk about emotional before that next component, because once you understand that, like going into the history, right? Once you understand the history of the person, once you understand the trauma of the person, once you understand who they are and where they're at now, kind of what George was talking about, I'm looking at the person now and who they are now, then that kind of brings you into that future ideology of, okay, well, what can we accomplish together and what can we do, whatever that might be. Um, but I really appreciate you, Daniel, bringing that up because that really is the next component. I'll share that in a minute. Um, Daisy, did you have anything? I know you're a little quiet, you might be occupied, but
No, my thoughts are very like mixed up in my head, and I don't know how to bring them out. So I don't want to waste anyone's time.
would you
Uh,
like to attempt? Do we want Daisy to attempt?
I think all your questions are tied together in my mind. Um, as Daniel said, love can mean different things for different people. So I think we need to define what love we're talking about. And I honestly think that all relation, how will I put that? boyfriend girlfriend relationship, I don't think is the same thing as marriage relationship. So for me, the answer for these two groups of relationship will be different.
Mm.
But if I have to give like a blanket statement, it will be it can be fixed when the other person decides that they don't want to work on fixing it. Because I strongly believe that only in a relationship, only one person can make it work.
And when you said one person can make it work. Is that what you?
Cannot make it work.
I agree. I
Only
agree.
one person cannot make it work. You can have all the love in the world, all the strength in the world, all the wisdom in the world, or all you can have everything inside of you. If the other person doesn't want to make it work, it will not work. For me, it's as simple as that.
I agree.
And I think everything we talked about, emotions, I see emotions as tools that inform us about something about ourselves. If in a relationship I'm feeling a feeling, anger, joy, sadness, resentment, it's coming from somewhere. So with emotion, I think there must always be an introspection. If I'm happy, why am I feeling happy? Am I feeling happy for the right reasons? Um, am I misunderstanding maybe my partner's action and I'm being happy, but reality I shouldn't be happy? Or if I'm angry, is my anger justified? Is my partner really doing something that is causing me to be angry, or is it my misunderstanding, misjudgment, or whatever that is making me angry? So trauma is informing my emotions. Uh, finances will be informing my emotion. There are a lot of things that will be informing my really my emotions. And when my emotions get to a point where they are so charged, I may decide, oh, I can't do it anymore. But again, I have to sit and think, I can't do it anymore because I'm feeling my emotions through the roof, or I can do it. It's just that I'm being so emotional right now. I still have the capacity to handle, but my emotions have the best of me. And there's some work that I can do on myself to calm myself down, whatever the emotion is. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I was wondering why you took so long. That was perfect. That was brilliant.
Because all of that was just shaking in my head.
I understood it. I understood it.
Okay.
I'm sure others understood as well. Um, I see Brittany clapping for that. So, and I see a thumbs up from Daniel. So you're on the mark, definitely. But I do agree with that. There's two different spectrums, right? There's the dating, and then there's the marriage. And it's like with dating, it's not as much weight, as marriage. The marriage, you really you vowed to them, right? This is supposed to be forever, until death do us apart. Um, and dating is just it's just dating, it's feeling it out. And when you have a disagreement or you don't like something, it's a lot easier to detach and separate. As opposed to marriage, that's a lot harder to separate because you've made a very strong commitment. So that was a great point, Daisy, that you mentioned. Um, but yeah, unless there was a response to that, I have one last question. Okay, so here is the last question. I want to be productive and constructive. And so, last question is very simple, maybe not. What is emotional intelligence? It's a broad statement. What is emotional intelligence? What does that consist of?
Yo, all the things.
Well,
All the things. Emotional intelligence. That's funny. I say this in whenever I'm like meeting with clients and stuff like that, right? And I'm like telling them the story of how I got to where I was. And when I started off, I was just like, um, I was just an assistant and I used to like trip out and someone would be like, yo, can you go grab coffee or can you go make me coffee? I'd be like, what the no, like I'm more than coffee, you know what I mean? And then like my growth in that, if you will, was like understanding that I was supporting the start of someone's day. I was creating ease, you know what I mean? I was a contributor to how something turned out, right? So it was like being able to finally be like, okay, first off, it's not about me. Right? A little bit of an ego death, if you will. But I was also young. Let me just point that out. I was younger. And so all the things, but I think emotional intelligence, I mean, it goes back to some of the things that we've definitely hit on across all these questions and these conversations, like um, the know yourself part, knowing how you show up, knowing how you affect others, understanding what those reactions can look like. I think being like tapped in. I am a chronic like overthinker and super cerebral. I read between the lines. Part of it comes, just as a um, part of my job, like being able to hear what's unsaid, watching little ticks, like stuff like that. So I think just understand. First off, people are people. Damn it, they're human. You know what I mean? And you gotta not only give yourself a break, but you gotta give other people a break too. Like everyone doesn't know themselves. Everyone, sometimes we're tired too, right? How many times you sitting in traffic and somebody, gets in front of you or whatever, and it's like, where you gonna go? You know what I mean? You have a whole moment. So I think emotional intelligence is one, understanding that it's a moving needle. Like first off, you're constantly growing and navigating uncharted waters, territories, and all the things. And I think being understanding, and I think someone mentioned it about like I don't know if someone mentioned, but like you just don't know what you don't know, right? And I think being fair to that. Um, I don't know if it taps into so much emotional intelligence as it does. I think folks would benefit from ease, right? We consume a lot of information on a daily basis, and we are constantly parsing through that to find ourselves and find how we relate, how we don't relate. There's also like comparison bias and like just not comparison bias, confirmation bias, where it's like if you only see the things that you agree with or that you like, then you further, solidify what it is. So then it's like a stunting of growth and all this stuff. So anyway, so I think really emotional intelligence is like knowing yourself well enough to know that like sometimes you're good, sometimes you're not. Like sometimes you're not toxic and sometimes you are. Like, that part.
you for that. Anyone else want to chime in on this last question?
Everything that she said. I mean, it's true. I just like the fact how she says like it's the way we show up. I think it's important. And then even the way we show up, it's really about how we can identify that or recognize it, right? Self-awareness of how we show up. Because some people show up in a way that they're not even emotional intelligent, right? But I think it's just being more self-aware. So if we show up being self-aware, it's just huge. It makes relationships and even your day, yourself, go by so much easier. But I think that's for me, emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And for me personally, I'm an empath. So like I also think that to have empathy with things, you don't have to truly like know exactly what people have been through, but at least can have some empathy towards it. Um, and I think that's also huge with emotional intelligence, especially with things that are going on in this world. It's just like a lot of people don't have emotional intelligence. First thing they want to do is go on social media and just blurt out whatever they feel. And so it's just not healthy. So, but at the end of the day, emotional intelligence is for me is self-awareness and having empathy.
Okay, appreciate that, Daniel. Daisy?
Yeah. I agree with Daniel and Brittany, and I would like to add a second piece. Emotional intelligence is also how our actions affect other people. I'd like to add that to the definition. And that's it.
That is true. That is a
I
very
have to head out. It was really nice meeting you guys and having this conversation.
Yeah, no
Thank you,
problem.
Carl.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye everyone.
Bye. Well, that was basically
Bye.
it. Daniel, I'm going to show you this really quick thing. Share my screen. I know you have to go as well. I want to let you know this is the next component, the intellectual component. So when you were discussing goals and progressing with your partner, I just want you to know you pretty much hit the nail on the next discussion. That's intellectual. That's the what are we doing together, right? Outside of just spending money and having sex. Now that we understand each other's emotions and we're connecting and we've agreed to move on forward with each other, now it's like how can we progress, right? What's that next step? Are we gonna build a charity? Are we gonna, build a company? Are we gonna, I don't know, whatever. Are we gonna grow a garden, right? But that's the next component. So, Daniel, thank you so much for being here and finding the Life Network however you did. We're just about on all platforms. Just type in the Life Network, Life with a Y, and please just come to the next discussion.
Sweet, man. I'll keep an eye on the emails.
All right, I
It's
appreciate
great.
it. All right, take care.
All right. Bye now.
Like.
Bye.